I think it was our first, all hands with the legal team was, someone had asked me, what does success look like for you in this role? And I right away said, I want to give them something to talk about. I want to give people something to talk about. Tipalti Legal does things differently.
Welcome back to CZ and Friends, where we talk with legal leaders, technologists, and operators driving innovation and excellence for their companies and beyond. I'm your host, Cecilia Zanidi. Today, we're in conversation with Alice Davidson, the General Counsel at Tipalti, and Jenna Hunt, the Head of Legal Operations at Tipalti. Together, they've built and evolved Tipalti's legal function to scale with a global fintech company, and they've done it with intention. Tipalti is a finance automation and global payments company supporting payment operations across 200 countries, 120 currencies via 50 payment methods. If you hear that and think, wow, that's a lot of legal department complexity to help manage, you would be correct. Alice is a seasoned securities and M&A lawyer and former chief legal officer at Mogo. She's also a legalese fitness trainer, a mom, and someone who leads with strength and precision, as well as a friend. Jenna is a legal ops powerhouse who's built Tipalti's legal operations from the ground up, blending customer success, AI efficiency, strategic planning, and change management into a powerhouse function at the company. In this conversation, we'll talk about what it takes to build an agile legal team, how legal ops becomes a strategic partner, and why executive presence looks different for everyone. Let's get into it. Welcome, Alice. Welcome, Jenna.
Thanks, Cecilia.
Hey,
Thanks for having us.
So excited you're here. All right. Alice, what does your day-to-day look like leading legal at Tipalti as the general counsel? Give us a window.
That is a big question. Well, I often say, I'll answer that by saying, I'm a full-time business person with a legal background. I think that is one of the myths, if anything, I like to debunk of, people think legal, right away they assume you're a lawyer doing lawyerly things all day. But when you're leading the legal and regulatory compliance function for a global company, it's a lot more than that. So, my days are varied. There are, of course, a lot of meetings, whether it's at the executive level with my team, cross-functional partners. But, a day could be anything from looking into international expansion, figuring out our licenses, dealing with privacy matters, figuring out, again, how a lot of my time is spent with Jenna, trying to figure out, again, how do we scale in an efficient and sustainable way, supporting the growth and the velocity of the business. We take pride in Tipalti and getting shit done and doing a lot on a daily basis. And that's why it's very hard to say, what is a typical day like? Because it honestly changes from day to day as our priorities continue to evolve and change on the daily. But yeah, I would say, no day is the same.
I love it. Jenna, come into this role. How did you go about starting and scaling legal operations, right? So I'm just thinking about the scale of 200 countries, presumably regulatory regimes across all of them. And based on what Alice just said, you add a country, you don't add a lawyer. So how did you think about that? And where did you start?
Yeah, so I actually came into Tipalti more in an admin role, just supporting our commercial function. So it was pretty commercial heavy, supporting our commercial team and some projects there. And then when Alice came in, I think she recognized that I was doing a lot more of that and doing legal ops, which I didn't even realize was a thing. So Alice was sort of like, you're not doing just this, you're doing legal ops. So let's create a legal ops function. So definitely kudos goes to Alice there for recognizing that's what I was actually doing and allowing me to sort of start up that function and roll with it. So we already had a lot of things in motion. And as much as I'm sort of a one-person team, it really is the whole team supports the operational stuff as well. Try to look at, what we were doing that was taking up most of our time and repetitively, and started there with the low-hanging fruit, and just have grown quickly from there, I guess, with various different projects and cross-functionally and just really efficiency is a big one for us. I always say I want our lawyers practicing at the top of their license. Yeah.
Can you unpack that a little bit? When you say top of the license, what is that practice?
Yeah. So, just as an example, right? Like lawyers negotiating NDAs is not practicing at the top of their license. So that was sort of a low-hanging fruit for a lot of people. I guess a low-hanging fruit of what we want to tackle. But for us, and it was just establishing those playbooks, empowering the business to make decisions, empowering the business to negotiate those things, creating automated workflows for pre-signed NDAs so that we don't need to even have legal involved. So things like that, where again, it's these repetitive small things that sometimes feel like a quick little ask from legal. We added all those up and realized that's where we were spending the bulk of our time and not on these strategic initiatives. We kept pushing the strategic initiatives down the priority list because of the on fire, daily asks from the sales team, or the stuff that's, those little things that the quick fixes. But we were not having the bandwidth, not having the time to tackle those strategic things. So Alice also is great at really reprioritizing us on that point. We're spending too much time on the daily small things that we don't really need to be spending time on, right? Like we want to be a partner to the business, not, coming in just doing these little daily tasks.
So pulling on that partnership thread from Jenna, Alice, so it sounds like you took like an architect mindset to this legal ops function. Put us in your head when you did that, and maybe a little bit about tapping Jenna. Obviously she's very talented, but how did you think about creating this function? And was it something like you were specifically hired to do, or say more about that?
Yeah. So, when I came in, I knew I was inheriting a team of brilliant legal minds, attorneys and non-attorneys. But what was missing was sort of the strategic element, right? We were just executing, we were kind of responding to the business needs, really focusing on, revenue at all costs, generating revenue. And I think that was part of the, um, um, legal trying to represent its value of we're not a cost center, we're enabling sales, we're enabling revenue, and that's really where the focus lied. I think there was many ideas, just a lack of executive sponsorship to allow this to happen, but also I clearly saw that there was an opportunity for legal to be elevated as a function internally, and for the breadth and the scope of the function to become a lot bigger. At the same time, I knew I was not getting any additional headcount, right? I knew our bookings were going to increase the next year. And sort of up to that date, the team kind of grew commensurate with that of, bookings are increasing by X percent or revenues expected to increase by X percent. We've got to add another lawyer. Your earlier point of, we're going into a new jurisdiction, we have to add another lawyer. And I knew that at our size, a pretty sizable team, I think when I joined Jenna, we were 11 or 12, two non-attorneys and nine attorneys, and about 1,000 employees. That's a pretty good ratio. So there was this need to kind of take a step back and, to your point, re-engineer or re-architect the way that we work internally as a team, but also the way that we support the business to continue to do the great things we were doing. One of the things I said, I've never seen a better relationship between a legal team and sales as what I had witnessed coming into Tipalti. And we can get into that a little bit later because it got to a point of over enablement and over reliance. And so it was, how do we sustain the great that we built, but lean into automation, lean into technology, lean into enablement and education so that we could create more self-service, that thereby, as Jenna said, enabling our attorneys and non-attorneys to practice at the top of the license and actually do the more strategic things that move the needle. One of the first things I said, I think it was our first, all hands with the legal team was, someone had asked me, what does success look like for you in this role? And I right away said, I want to give them something to talk about at Faulty Legal, whether it's a particular transaction or something that we did, the way that we employ technology, but it's just really the way that we deliver value and deliver legal and services. And it's really premised upon that partnership. I think I've heard you both say the word and going away from being counsel and being an advisor to being, to borrow from our friends in the world of HR, a legal business partner, right? And trying to change that perception and the way that relationship worked.
So that's amazing. We've got kind of the architect, you tap Jenna, you're doing this, you've got these strategic goals. Jenna, what are the key ways that you and Alice collaborate? And how have you defined kind of what the GC does, what legal ops does, and then empowered everyone on the legal team to step up to become those legal business partners?
I mean, I like to think I'm Alice's right hand gal. We work very closely
I'll second
together.
that.
But at the same time, she's really empowered me and the rest of the team she has that trust in us and has empowered us to, we're on the ground doing, we're seeing where these issues are or where the lack of efficiency is and to go fix it. Right. So she has been fabulous in that sense of, I can count on her to be the seat at the table for us at the executive level, be an influencer in that point of view. And she's been fabulous there. And we've gotten so much support with the projects that we've wanted to do to support the efficiency on our own team and how we work with the other teams cross-functionally. It's just, open communication and keep each other updated on what's going on. Again, she's there when I need help for escalating something, but she's really left myself and the team to build what we need to build to make our lives better. And again, to have the lawyers, practicing at the top of their license, to not have this over reliance on legal for things. So yeah, really empowerment, I think, is like a key differentiator that I've experienced here at Tipalti and with Alice, is that there's trust there, which is, I think, is big.
Love that.
And you
Does
need
any
that when you're, sorry, Shelley, I was going to say, you need that when you're doing something different, something new, right? There is no playbook for what we're trying to create. As Jenna said, you didn't even know legal ops was a thing. It's becoming a term in the last few years, but people are still trying to define exactly what that is. So I think with that sense of trust and that sense of kind of trial and error, knowing that, we might not get things right the first
Yeah.
time or
Not
at
everything's
all
worked. And that's, yeah.
yeah, and there's been a lot of that, and there's been a lot of things of, you know what, you probably should not prioritize that, but you only, you learn by doing, and unless you trial these things, and especially again when you're trying to innovate, right? That's part of being innovative, is you're doing things differently. No one's done it before, or you're challenging the way things have been done in the past, and with that, has to come trust and discretion as well, right? To be able to that enablement, that empowerment piece, and we all have different ideas, and putting them to fruition, testing them out, and seeing what sticks. And not all of it does, and some of it does. And yeah, we continue to trial and error from that perspective.
Yeah. And
I love
challenging
it.
each other as well. I think that's a big piece that I love about our team is, even like Alice will say something and she allows me to challenge her on it. And I'm not always right. She's not always right. It's a very, like, there's not this hierarchical, like, listen to everything I say and that's what goes. We challenge each other back and forth. The whole team, we get together and have these very productive conversations and challenge each other on things when, someone's leaning one way or another. We think we need to solve the problem this way or that way. So that piece as well is kind of fits into the empowerment. But I know that, Alice isn't gonna fire me if I challenge her on something, because I can see it sometimes from a different lens than her. So that's what makes our team great, is we're all coming in with different backgrounds and different lenses. And it's nice, like, as a non-lawyer, that my voice is heard as well, which is fabulous. So
And a
I
non-lawyer
love that.
perspective and voice is so refreshing, right? Among a sea of lawyers. And I think that's part of the success of having a legal ops. And not that all legal ops people are not lawyers, but to the extent that you can bring people of different backgrounds. Jenna, for example, customer service, right? And you could tell when you speak to her, you could tell that she's done that for a year. She's got that customer-centric mindset, right? And that is, I think, what makes her so well liked and also trusted within the organizations by other departments, right? Is that she knows how to talk to customers and end users, et cetera. And lawyers can often get kind of caught up in the legalese and the negotiation, et cetera, and the human element can often sort of disappear a little bit. And so I think the infusion kind of the traditional legal with legal ops and having non-attorneys on the team is part of the secret sauce, right? To having a
I
successful
think it's
team.
amazing. I mean, yeah, the secret sauce aspect of, like, this is something that I thought about. Is like, I came up as an in-house lawyer at Amazon, and customer obsession was a value. And it was a question of, like, can in-house legal display customer obsession, not only for your internal clients, but also for the end users? And my experience, you absolutely can. And in fact, it's a huge career differentiator if you can. And so, unsurprising, these two are humble. But when we were negotiating, our agreement, they are GCI customers, but we were speaking about that. We worked with their security team, and we resolved the considerations, and we talked about SOC 2 and what have you. But in that meeting, the security person told us, I hope you'll allow me to say this. He said, Jenna and her team want this tool. They really know what they're doing. I love them. I will do what I can in my power to ensure that we have the security practices that we need to get what they want. And that kind of buy-in, I think, reflects the deliberate work that you've done, and it reflects this approach that you just described.
Yeah, no, that's thank you for that little reminder. I was not in that, but that is exactly what happened, right? And when you get that buy-in and that partnership, right? And that trust, again,
Exactly.
with your end users, with your customers, they reciprocate it. And when you need something, because at the end of the day, at that point in time, we were a customer of the security team, right? And
Exactly.
we were seeking
Exactly.
their approval on something. We wanted to move forward with something quickly, and that partnership went both ways. And thank goodness.
Yeah,
I
I
mean, I
love it.
think we had you up and running before they actually approved, but we're not going to tell anyone that.
Well, we'll keep that between us and our
Between
listeners.
us and everyone who might listen to this.
yeah.
Exactly. No, I mean, it does happen. It's been a benefit of selling to legal teams, is they can get us approved. Although I will say, we have been guinea pigs for the AI approval and governance process. Recently, we got GCI presented to an audit committee of a board, And that was very similar where the company had an AI process and this was what they were doing. And we were actually the first instance of a business team presenting a use case to that committee. So it worked out great.
That is very cool.
All right. So let's talk about basically kind of more a little bit on leadership. So Jenna, you say you're a tech implementation survivor. So that's besides the kind of reminding me of the show, which I have affection for. What's a project that tested your resilience, like or something you're proud of that you worked on?
I mean, I feel like it's a badge of honor in the legal ops community saying you had a failed CLM. I think everyone has at least one under their belt. But I always say it was, in the moment, it was frustrating that we had a CLM implementation fail. When I got hired, I kind of got thrown into it and we tried to make it work for about a year. But that experience, I learned so much. I learned so much about like the process of being a part of the implementation. And because of my customer success and sales background, I was so used to being on the other side. So it was so interesting to finally be the customer and have to go through that process. So I learned so much about just that part of it. And also that's how I knew, okay, this wasn't the right product for us, but now I know what is, right? I know what didn't work. I know what we actually need. I know now what problem we're actually trying to solve, because before it was just, and fair enough, we kind of just got sold on this end-to-end solution that we didn't need and didn't fit for our business. So it just wasn't the right fit and it wasn't what we needed. But that experience just helped me grow too so much as a legal ops professional, of understanding that whole process and understanding why it failed and, how we could make sure that didn't happen the next time. So, and yeah, right now we're implementing 2 other new pieces of legal software, which are going well. So that's exciting. But yeah, it's definitely a badge of honor, I think, in the legal ops world. Ambitions, as everyone knows, can be difficult. As I always say, like with GCAI, it was didn't even feel like an implementation. It was just an on switch.
I love it. I love
easiest
that.
legal AI to get on board with, because there is no implementation.
Yeah, no, I mean,
And the
I'm touched to
craziest
hear you say
feature
that.
velocity. I was going to say, and
Yeah,
the craziest
good.
and
No, I'm
fastest
so
feature
glad.
velocity. I think you might take the award for that. Where you request something in the morning and it's there by the afternoon.
I
Yeah.
love it. I
But
love
if
it.
I can
This is
add to
good.
Jenna,
Please.
to your point, when I came in, that was kind of the tail end of, the writing was on the wall of like, this is not going to work. And I think you and others on the team knew that, but there was still this fear of failure, right? Of, well, we've spent all this time and effort, we've invested this money in this, I can't remember if it was a 3-year contract because you managed to get us out of it and get our money back. But oh no, she's tough.
Nice work.
Yeah, she's a great right hand. It was, again, to my point about empowerment and not being afraid to fail. And I said we walk away from this. It didn't work. Let's cut our losses today instead of going forward with, like, that's okay to me. That's not a failure. That's, we've tried something and it didn't work. And there's all these circumstances. And of course, the company wanted us to do a postmortem. And now it's sort of been like one of the poster children for poor implementations. But we're proud of that because, again, we walked away and we recognized and we took the lessons away. And now, 2 years later, we're in a very different position. And, we're not getting second guessed by the business. We have the trust that we're making the right decisions, making the right choices and the right investments because, again, we've learned from what didn't work. And often people are so hard to cut their losses, right? And I think that's the biggest, again, part of innovating and doing things differently and trialing and erring and legal ops, really, for that matter, more broadly.
Yeah. So what do you know based on that project? What do you mentioned you've got 2 going well now, Jenna, and then obviously kindly mentioned GCI is going well, but what are the kind of either tenants or takeaways or, when you did that retrospective, which by the way, I don't like calling them postmortem because it's like somebody died. We call it a retro. That might be an Amazon term too, but so what are the things now that like your sort of legal ops tenants or things that you're looking at when you're implementing these big systems, Jenna?
I mean, even before you get to the implementation point of just selecting something, is like taking your time, actually understanding what problem you're trying to solve. I think it's funny, even like when we're helping internal customers with vendor contracts and you ask them that question, it's like, I don't know, you get caught up in the sales cycles and the fancy things, and you're trying to, the salesperson convinces you that they are solving all your problems that you didn't even realize you had. And then suddenly you've got this, piece of technology in your company that doesn't connect to anything, and why implementation failed because we didn't think of those things beforehand. So just the pre-signature part for me was like where we went wrong and where we really turned around on in terms of how we chose and are still purchase the 2 that we're implementing right now, and for ones going forward, of really taking the time to it's more work and seems frustrating and it's going to slow you down, but it's worth it because then you are actually purchasing something that does solve the problems that you're going to solve. And then just understanding too, the data piece, right, is always the garbage in, garbage out. I hear a lot as well in the legal ops community. If you're needing to import legacy data into something, like actually truly understanding what does that mean? What data cleanup do you need to do? Or what can the vendor do? And that type of thing. So the pre like signature part for me is like the biggest where we learned our lesson of figuring that point out. And then same with time, like even this time with implementation, it always is going to take way longer than you think it is going to. Even that's been a lesson for me with a lot of these recent ones is our, go live date has kept being pushed because like life happens. There's stuff that comes up every day. Like Alice said, every day is different. You always think I'm going to have the afternoon to, focus on this. And then suddenly that afternoon is gone. So everything takes a bit longer than I think. And that's even been, recently a learning for me is trying to under promise, over deliver in terms of timelines, I think is a good one.
There's a Far Side cartoon or something where a software vendor is like showing somebody, heaven and it's beautiful. And then the scene cuts over and it's hell. And they're like, well, what's going on here? And they're like, oh, that was the demo version. It's like, so yeah, basically this idea of like really thinking through it in advance. There is a concept too, I think in legal ops of like go slow to go fast, where it's like, it's not our instinct as a fast growing company, but then to like hit pause and kind of like take that time on the front end to then not have that on the back end. That's great advice. I love that.
Yeah. And think about the downstream effects too, right? Like again, we work with a lot of teams. And so it was like, okay, if we're going to have this piece of technology that affects this workflow, who is involved in this workflow, right? Like really thinking about those stakeholders, involving them, making sure they're aware. What new technology do they have on their roadmap that might be changing, right? That's another thing that people often don't think of. Okay, this is going to fit in with X piece of technology. You purchase it, and then suddenly you find out that, sales got rid of X technology and is now using Y, and suddenly you're stuck with something. So it's a lot of just trying to think ahead to those downstream effects of where things are going to break or go wrong, or you're going to get pushback from the teams that you're working with or that are integrated in these pieces of technology is big. So I think you just think this is for our team. So, it's our decision and our decision alone. But again, we work with everyone and everything's connected.
I love that. So on that point of like the shifting business, either software or priorities, Alice, how do you do OKRs or how do you do your planning for your team, knowing that, like let's use a contemporary example, like tariffs or something, or like, things that are not predictable, even COVID. How do you make goals for legal and run your team in that environment?
In terms of, it's I think the one thing about goals is they got to be fluid, right? They have to evolve with the business and realities. And I think it's often we just get so set of here's the number. Yes, your booking numbers, your all the sort of the corporate goals might remain the same, but the way in which we enable them might change, whether that's from quarter to quarter or even month to month. Being okay with that. Again, I think there's often this expectation when you set OKRs, like let's make sure we set them in a way where, we get as much green as possible, right? Like let's make them, you do want them to be achievable, but at the same time, then are you sort of selling yourself short by only committing to the minimum? And having stretch goals, I think, is important. And yeah, we went through sort of the first go around. I took a step back, right? I think Jenna and the team were kind of ready to delve into, okay, well, what are we actually going to accomplish this year? Like, let's have, a list of deliverables of tasks. And we're in a very task oriented, again, GSD mentality company. That is very normal. But I said, hold on, there's a part of the strategic, right? There's a tactical. We'll get to that, but let's take a step back and set a strategy for ourselves. And it really started with coming up with kind of, we thought 2 to 3 team objectives that should remain constant year to year. And it's like those objectives will then, our goals, we'll take the company goals, the company-wide goals, and establish our OKRs over that. But there's going to be these overarching objectives that for our team strategically, we want to accomplish through these goals. So for us, those 3 objectives have been a thriving and engaged legal team, strong business partners, and operational excellence. So that's the 3 things, like the 3 pillars of our legal department. And if you think about it, you can layer a lot of things under that, right? And there's gonna be a lot of overlap. And so even when we do go through our annual planning and then we review it on a quarterly basis, we kind of have this, I don't know what colors we have, Jenna, they're multi-branded, but we have 3 colors that correspond with those 3 objectives that we always remind ourselves of. We are actually beyond achieving this particular objective or this particular company goal. We're actually still fulfilling our broader mission and what we're trying to do as a departments. On the one hand, taking a step back, having this kind of broader view. And then on the other hand, once you get into the nitty gritty and the details, realizing that they will need to change and shift, and that's okay. And for us, for a long time, we were focused on how do we reprioritize this, and we're trying to do constantly doing more with less. The demands, that's the great thing about being a business partner, is you get more inbounds and people coming to you. But then we started saying, okay, business, you tell us then what's important, right? Because we're trying to figure it out, but really what's important to you? I'm telling you, out of these 10 things, we're going to be able to accomplish 4 by the end of the quarter, right? You tell us which 4 you want to see, which ones, we can plan to next quarter. And to me, that's that partnership, right? It's not a one-way street, right? And even though we are in a way a service provider and an enabler and all of these things, we're still are a partner, right? And we're still part of the bigger picture here. And we need to have that feedback of, are we focusing on the right things, or do we need to shift here and there? And I think there's really good alignment from that perspective. And we do it at the executive level on a quarterly basis. We go through our, quarterly business reviews, and that is an opportunity. Even, I say, okay, like looking back, that's what we did, but looking forward, this is what we're focusing on. Like, speak now or forever hold your peace if that's not the right priority. But at the same time, also then reminding them of, what we as a team are trying to do beyond just enabling and accomplishing these business goals and OKRs.
So much to unpack there. Jenna, what's your point of view?
Yeah, I think I've seen a big transition from when Alice started the way we did OKRs and thought about goals. And again, she sort of mentioned this about kind of let us do the way we were doing. And then this year we've really rejigged it. We really went from being extremely granular to like, who's doing this exact task like every month or quarter or year. And it was like, again, we were just kind of doing those for the sake of having something to say, yep, we did this kind of thing. Or, that's something that we're doing as a part of our job. That's not really a goal that we need to be tracking, or that's not benefiting the team at all by saying, okay, yes, we did this every month. I think, yeah, we really took a step back, I agree, and figured out, okay, what are like the guiding lights? And yeah, we came up with those 3. And I think that's always a good reminder for us with a lot of these projects when we're having those moments or even days of like, okay, like what should I be focusing on? Or, how is this timeline for my implementation needs to be shifted? We go back to our team guiding lights, those 3 pillars, and how they, match to the company goals. And again, we meet continuously on this. So this is another thing we dropped the ball on last year, is it's easy to, put them in place, and then you get to quarter 3 and nothing aligns with what you're actually doing. So we're being better this year of like, we're meeting continually with the leaders. We're saying, okay, what did we drop the ball on? Okay, are we moving that into the next quarter, or are we saying that's no longer a priority? And a lot of the times it's no longer a priority, because what was a priority last week sometimes now is like, that ship has sailed. We're moving on to something else. It's that the GST thing, we're moving quickly all the time. So you have to shift. So there's no point of writing, 300 things down about what you're going to accomplish this year when 2 weeks later that whole list has already changed.
I love it. And GSD, folks, is get stuff done, which is that's it sounds like a core principle at Tipalti. I love that. On that note, I guess, Alice, you mentioned that you might have 10 proposed OKRs and go through a collaborative process with the business to understand which are going to be the 4 that you're going to do. Now, that is painful for us legal types, right? Like, we're type A, we're used to checking stuff off on our list. What do you do when you have those extra 6? And how do you, is it like you go based on risk, or you're just like, hey, look, like it's going to be better to get these 4 done well? Like, help us make that trade-off. And we, as background, I just talked with another guest who said the same thing, where it's like, was a big part of her transition as a leader. So say a little bit about that.
Yeah. And, if I think about like different ways of sort of prioritizing, you think about, urgent and important. That's one sort of axis that I started plotting things on. And then very quickly, everyone's like, well, that is important. That is important. That is important. That is important. That is urgent. That is urgent. And it's like, no, take a step back. Not everything can be urgent and important. Like, that's the reality of it, right? Otherwise, it should have been done by now. So sort of really challenging myself and ourselves on urgent for who, when, right? Importance for who? Like, what is it actually going to unlock? Like, what do those 2 things mean? And realizing that, yeah, sometimes, you need to go for the low-hanging fruit and the little wins, but sometimes you just actually have to roll up your sleeves, invest the time, the energy, the amount to do the stuff that's probably at the bottom of the list because it keeps falling off, right? Because everything else, is either more exciting or more urgent or more important, realizing that that is going to be an enabler, an unlocker to all of the other things that you're trying to accomplish. That's broadly speaking. Yeah, of course, there's risk-based, right? Sometimes something becomes a little bit more important because the risk has increased or the risk appetite has changed. But at the same time, I think having the trust of my CEO and the rest of the executive team that I'm doing the right things, right? In the room, I'm listening, I understand what the priorities are for the company. Let me and my team enable that in whatever capacity we want to, right? So again, that fluidity, that change, the 6 things that are on there that again, I know you want me to accomplish, but I'm telling you right now, that's not a good use of our time or resources, et cetera, right? So it's just that I wish I had a perfect formula, but I think to Jenna's early, what you said, Jenna, earlier, I think where we failed or flawed or whatever you want to call it in the process last year is yeah, we didn't come back to it often enough, right? And then you realize that it's like, yeah, again, ship has sailed. Nobody cares about that anymore. We could have now, it's still dragging us down. We're not accomplishing things. Just take it off. Don't be afraid to take things off the list. I like to your point about ticking things off. Sometimes just removing something from a list is actually even more
It's
rewarding,
like the
right? Because it's
psychology
not
of No, I'm the same way.
right.
We have on my whiteboard, we've got, the deals that we've closed won. And then I have basically closed lost on there. And then at one point I'm like, you know what? Nah, I literally
Yes.
symbolically took, the dry erase board and erased them because I just do not need to be reminded of that every
To be
day.
reminded of it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, next play, right? It's like this sort of like very leadership thing around like, I think it was Coach K from Duke, and then basically the CEO of LinkedIn, Jeff Weiner, says the same thing where it's like, okay, you can celebrate your wins in business and decree your losses, but ultimately like the thing that keeps you going is that velocity and like
Yes.
being able to look at that next thing, and which both of you described. So I love that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, Jenna, you talk about, and we mentioned this a little bit, being bilingual, business and legal. When do you draw on each language, and what does that mean?
I feel like I do this on a daily basis. And I know Alice sort of mentioned this as well, but I think this also helped me really build that rapport with our sales, customer success, the business teams is you could just see, in training sessions or emails that were being sent, it's like they're looking at it like, I have no idea what this means. And fair enough, coming from sometimes the lawyers, like the communication to the sales team about, okay, this is what you need to say, or this is the situation. And it was just sort of like a deer in the headlights, but almost like this like fear to admit that they didn't understand, even though, fair enough, you don't speak this language, right? So I felt like I did a lot of that when I first started, of pointing out like, hey guys, like that is not going to land with a sales team who didn't go to law school like you guys did. Like it's nothing against salespeople. It just is you're speaking a different language. They don't have the same background, the same context, the same training that you guys do. So we need to make this ingestible if we actually want them to learn and empower them to be able to do that, right? So I think we were trying to tell them things, but in a language they didn't understand. So then when I came in, I really tried to convert that to because I've been in their shoes, and also even I know what the customers would say to things. I'm like, that's, nice in concept, but in the reality, like customers aren't going to take that as like a pushback, or they're not going to understand that as an explanation. So like, why don't we try saying it this way instead? So that I think like really helped us build that relationship, as I was kind of that person in between that then they came to. And Alice and I joke about this. So as we almost did too good of a job at that though. And this is the risk to that relationship building piece, is that now we've almost become the department of default for things. So it's funny, we've kind of shifted from this like department of no, which, legal teams get slapped with, to now we sort of feel like we're the department of default because they trust us too much. We've been too helpful. So now we're almost in this weird situation on the other side where everyone's coming us, like if people don't know the answer to something or something's challenging or whatever, it's like just go to legal. So it's kind of almost an interesting thing that I would almost warn people about, because it's like, don't do too
Yeah,
good a
yeah.
job at building that bridge, because then suddenly like everyone's coming over the bridge and over to your side, and we're like, oh crap, like we built too good of a
Yeah,
relationship.
it's funny you say that. I literally this morning spoke with the CLO of a consumer product packaged goods company, and she said effectively the same thing, where legal was so good at pointing out typos that they basically became the default copy editor for the entire marketing department. And it was like, and you can kind of see how that would happen, right? We have this legal skill set. We've, literally we're precise AF. And then suddenly you're reviewing, copy editing for things that have zero legal implications. So it's fascinating. I actually think, for our listeners, a lot of it is going to be like, if you can aspire to do that, to kind of like almost swing the pendulum, maybe a little too far to client service and then swing back. I think that's a good, it's a good goal. So, and congrats to both of you for being in that position, to have teams rely on you so much. And then, also recognizing that, okay, building this longer term, we can't be, reviewing, press releases for typos or whatever instead of legal issues.
Yeah,
How do you do that?
Alice does it as well. Like, she's a business person.
Percent. It's like that is, it's that demystifying lawyers, and we made ourselves so approachable that we made ourselves too approachable in a way, right? Again, to that point, it's that over enablement, and it's good, it's a compliment, right? But then it's like that, it's not sustainable, and to your point, it's how do we tweak it, how do we swing that pendulum back and forth, or find somewhere in the center. On the language piece specifically, this is something I'm very passionate about. I don't like, just I can't stand legalese, and I can't stand when people talk in an overcomplicated way, whether they want to show that they're smartest person in the room. And you see this all the time between lawyers and negotiations. And it's just not part of my MO and part of my DNA. And, when I came into this company, the acronyms and terminology that I didn't understand. So that's technical language that I don't understand. And I'm always the first person to say, like, there are no dumb questions. If you don't understand something, you got to ask it. So I'm a very firm believer, proponent of that. And I do it all the time. And I think that also, enabled people to come to us more often now. Some of the questions, they're not dumb. They shouldn't be asking us. They should be asking their manager, right? It's one of those things of, this is not a legal question by any means. You're literally asking me how to do your job. But I
Or
do
maybe
think
they
it's
ask
important.
AI.
Well,
I mean, that's a good
that was
question.
going to be
So full disclosure, obviously, Jenna and Alice are users of GCAI, but I think they've done some really creative things around the client comms. So tell me how you're using AI for that kind of use case.
Well, I'm so glad you brought this up, because I've said this to, members of the team who might struggle more a little bit with being more verbose and having this as like, okay, I'm having a hard time understanding your memo or your email. Guess what I did? I put into GCAI and had it dumb it down for me. Like, me, the GC of this company, has to do that. And think about the other person that is at the end of your communication. So now I truly encourage everybody on my team of run your memo, run your email, run your Slack through there. I mean, the prompts are there already for you. You guys have done the work for us in terms of landing your comms. I use it routinely for my executive team, because I can also, I can get sometimes caught up in the details and be too verbose. So for us, like, that aspect of the tool is so important, because it's taking your normal natural language, what comes natural to you, and adapts it in a way that, the recipient is going to receive that message, right? And in a most effective way. So we use it all the time. To your point about, like, I used to say that, actually not as much here, but at my former job, I'd get asked a question. I said, well, I don't know. Did you Google it? Because I'm about to. Right? You're asking me something like, I'm going to start with Google. So there's no reason why I have to do it. You could Google it yourself, right? And to your point now, AI has displaced Google by being way smarter. And you actually have, this intern or whatever the case may be, or an agent in another place answering your questions. So it's like, to me, again, it's so obvious and it's available to us. Why wouldn't we use it, right? And I know how much time I have spent in the past, looking and rethinking my communication and rewriting. And is this going to sound okay? Now it's literally the press of a button. You know who your audience is. You know how you want to land your message, and it helps from that perspective. Which means you can still be you. You can still draft in a way that comes most natural to you, is easiest for you, but it's going to be that much more effective because it's going to land with your audience in a way that they best receive the information.
Yeah. And even like what we're doing, I've talked to you about this before, Julia, about what we're doing with our vendor reviews. Like, after the vendor contract is signed, like, we've built a prompt in our team that they then run through GCAI, and it kind of gives an executive summary almost of a dumbed down version of like, hey, business owner of this new piece of technology, like, FYI, these are the things that you should be aware of as like the business owner of this that are in the contract. Make sure that you're only, using this many users. And if anyone else logs in, we're going to be charged more other, renewals, that type of thing. So we are using it for that as well, of like, hey, this vendor agreement signed now. Here's an email kind of cover page of here's all the points to be aware of and sending that to the business owner. So things like that as well. It's like just that translation of instead of, we always say, make sure you understand what's in the contract. And they're like, yeah. They're not.
This is the thing is like using AI for these sort of comms that are like, just make the whole department run better. Sounds like it.
Yes.
And also the business, right? Because we've had, like, I don't think, I used to support BD at one of my roles where it was like we'd have these very complex agreements, 67-page, outsourcing agreements and things. And 3 years later, of course, nobody who did the deal is still there working on that same project. And so having a very crisp communication of what you did. And of course, I go back to my former litigator days. I litigated a very early Salesforce contract. I represented somebody against Salesforce. And essentially, the company came back and said, basically, it was a license question of whether all licenses were going to pay the same amount. And I was able to prove to, at the time, Salesforce that the license fee should have been a lot lower because we had a very clear email from an internal stakeholder saying like, hey, here's our contract we just signed. Here's how the licenses work. And we forwarded that to, at the time, Salesforce. And they came back and they went away with their extra license ask. So it's kind of this like things that you'll thank yourself for later. I mean, I love that you all are using AI for that. It's great. All right. So let's see. So let's go to the lightning round. This is a fast take. Don't think too hard about it. All right. So your favorite part of your job, Jenna?
My team.
Amazing. How about you, Alice?
You stole my answer, my team.
I love this. All right.
Yes.
And then what's your bold prediction? What is AI going to be doing for you and your team in 3 years?
First thing that came to my mind was like super intern. It's like intern right now. So I'm like, it's going to be our super intern.
Amazing. I love that.
Yeah, I think just it's never going to displace us. It's just going to make us more efficient, right? I think even some of the things that we're grappling today, whether it's setting goals or something like that, right? We're going to be able to, I think, rely on AI on a lot more of the strategic pieces as well, I think. Again, as we feed our models and the models get to know our business, I just think it's just going to become that much more powerful in terms of potential use cases and outputs.
Yeah,
I love that.
Really, it's part of the team. Like it already is. So that's why I'm like, it's going to be so much further part of the team in 3 years. But
love that. Awesome. All right. Before we wrap, Alice, what advice would you give to someone starting off in legal ops or joining an in-house team in fintech today?
I would say you are, the fact that you're joining somebody in fintech, you're at liberty to innovate and to do things differently, and don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid to, challenge the status quo of what's being done at that company, challenge the status quo of what you've done before. Just don't be afraid to do things differently, because I think particularly in the space where, innovation is king, I think sometimes we forget that our internal processes, those are subject to disruption as well. And, the legal profession is the last to be disrupted and one that probably needs the most disruption. So don't be afraid to be that force and start small or go big and anything in between. Yeah, just trial and error, do things differently and learn from it.
Oh, yeah, you took all of it. It really is that like, you don't need this huge background in legal ops. Legal ops still is kind of in the, infancy phases. So there's not a lot of people I think that have, years and years of it. But I, came into it without a legal background, without an ops background, obviously had some transferable skills, but I just kind of jumped right in. And again, the trial and error, it was like, what's working, what's not working, and how can I fix things? And speaking up, right? Like just because I'm not a lawyer on a team with lawyers, have a voice. And also, find the people that are wanting to listen and wanting to give you that space to try, have that trial and error and space to grow. So yeah, I know not everyone is as lucky as I am in that sense, but it definitely helps.
Thank you both. Your partnership, like it's just so clear that you work so in such a lovely way together and lead and really have earned the trust of the rest of the business in so doing. It's such a clear example of kind of the modern legal department and what that looks like and supporting a growing business globally. So absolute kudos. So for listeners who want to learn more about you or Tipalti or follow your work, what's the best place to find you?
God, this is what LinkedIn. I am the worst person at social media. So find Jenna and then she'll find me.
Bye, Jenna. All right. Good. Yeah,
Jenna's giving us an opportunity to plug ourselves here, and we're like, oh gosh.
No, it's good. I love it. Yeah, so we'll put in the show notes. We'll drop their LinkedIn's. I don't know if the Tipalti team is hiring because they're so efficient, but if they are, this is a team you want to work with. They work with a lot of Silicon Valley bellwethers. If you've ever been paid online, chances are it went through Tipalti. So I'd love to hear that. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was really lovely to speak with you. I'm glad to have had the conversation with friends.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, we
thank you for
really
having us.
appreciate it. We appreciate your friendship and partnership as well. And yeah, thank you for making our day, all of our days easier every day with GCAI. I mean that.
Yeah.
You're the best. All right,
Yeah.
thank you so much. That was
Thank
lovely.
She didn't
you.
ask us to plug it either. So
No, there was
No.
exactly.
Conversation with Alice Davidson and Jenna Hunt of Tipalti, legal leaders and in-house who are driving their companies forward. And you could see from how excitedly they talked about what they're doing, how they empower the business, and how they think about legal goals, that they are really hyper effective. And it's such a treat to hear from them. If you're building in fintech, scaling legal ops, new to in-house, or just running your team with a little more clarity and care and goal direction, I hope today's episode gave you something real to work with and something to think about. Going forward, you can follow Legal and Friends wherever you get your podcast to hear more conversations like this, or head to gc.ai to learn more about how we support legal teams and we're the AI of choice for teams wanting to move fast and operate with excellence the way that Jenna and Alice just explained they did. Until next time, build clearly, lead practically, happy prompting, and always keep people at the center. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.